Welcome to Mac Moments. I am Melissa Chavez, founder and CEO. This podcast is a space for honest conversations about focus, leadership, and what it really looks like to build and grow a business in real time. Each episode is a moment to slow down, think clearly, and move forward with intention. Let us get started.
My name is Adam Chalmers. I do two things right now. I'm the market area manager for Spherion Staffing and Recruiting in Madison, Morgan, and Limestone County, Alabama, which encompasses a lot of different things from sales to operations to some recruiting to marketing to all of it. And then also, as of this past January, I launched my own project. It's called Culture Compass. And it's really a learning and development brand specifically focused at, I call them young leaders, not necessarily have to be young by age, but young by experience. It just provides resources to people who are looking to build their leadership philosophy from the ground up. That is my passion project, my side business, my hustle, whatever you want to call it.
I know, it's so crazy. Yeah. I think that many entrepreneurs just have that never-ending brain of going into, what else can I do? Or what about this idea? And how can I do this? How can I fit it in? So how are you fitting it in with your full-time role and then slowly adding this new venture?
I think it's a couple different things, right? So first off, I have full support from my employer, which is great. I also work for my dad, so it'd be kind of awkward if I didn't. I'm really just trying to put the least amount of pressure on myself. I believe in myself. I want it to be successful. But from the same standpoint, I did a lot of reading on just people launching businesses, because I don't actually have a business degree, which is kind of how all this started. I thought there was a need, which we can get into that later. But I read a book where, I forget what the title is, but basically they interviewed, I think, 15 startups that their founders were graduates of the Harvard Business School. Mm-hmm. And they had polled a couple hundred, and they found all this data that by far startups are more successful when the owner keeps their day job than when they just quit everything and go all in. And I am not a quit everything and go all in person anyway. So that made it click to me that, hey, I could do this on the side. It's a lot of weekends, a lot of nights, a lot of lunch breaks. But I think the biggest thing for me that I did was I took a lot of time before I actually said anything to anybody to get all of the hard work done. So now it's more social media content and writing short form things, but I wrote a whole ebook and didn't tell a soul that I was doing it. So that really let me do it on my pace, and it was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but nobody knew, so it didn't matter.
Isn't it amazing though, when you're building something, there's so much back end work that goes into it that people don't see. And so when they see you on social media, finally, they're like, man, when did all this happen? Mm-hmm. You're like still sweating from all of the work that you put into it. So one of the things you said was you kept your day job to launch this. The financial component of that, I think, is something a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people are under the impression that when you start a business, you're just going to make all of this money right away. Mm-hmm. So you invest into your business. So not just the time, but any resources to get the books, to find the educators and the people that can support you. Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty amazing. So are you excited? What's going to be your niche market? Who are you going to focus on?
Well, I think for a lot of businesses, the best thing is yourself as the ideal buyer. And really the reason that I thought this was something that was a need is, like I said, I do not have an BBA or an MBA or some sort of business degree. I was a teacher. I actually have a history degree with a side certification in education. So when I made the transition to business, like I said, I work for my dad, I work for my family, so I have a lot of knowledge there, and I've gotten a lot of training there, but I'm someone that really likes, on-the-job training is great, and I think it's the most valuable, but I love supplementing that with books, material, podcasts, reading. I love doing all that stuff. And what I really found was, in my opinion, there are three main areas of leadership coaching. There's executive coaching for people that are experienced, seasoned leaders. There is a corporate-based coaching where somebody might have, a large organization might have a program that they do with their employees, a formal mentorship program. And then there are a group of people that own coaching companies, but a lot of them are primarily based off of one philosophy or one product. And so people that say, I have this psychological survey, or I have this spreadsheet index or whatever, and this is the one philosophy.
Right.
And I have always been I want to take in everything kind of person. And so the idea behind Culture Compass was, like I said, I wrote an ebook, and in that book you will not find like, this is what you need to do to be successful, this is what you need to do as a leader. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. What it is basically the number one core value I have of Culture Compass is people do not need to wait for a title to start leading. I've always been someone that has wanted to take on leadership challenges. In college, I was the president of a social club that had 200 people. I was an athletic director and a head football coach of a school at 22. I didn't even have a football team at that point, or a varsity football team. We made it. We started it back. Now I'm in a leadership role for a company running a multi-million-dollar office at 26. So I've always liked the challenge. And what I've learned from others, especially people maybe in the less entrepreneurial world, more kind of corporate, is people don't really start thinking about developing their leadership abilities until they get that role. And so you get the role and then you kind of cram. And my philosophy has always been, I want to be working on my leadership all the time. And so at Culture Compass, you're not really going to find this is the path you need to take. It's more so, here are some options. This is what different people say are successful. It might work for you, it might not work for you. But just doing the stuff, just going out there and trying to make yourself better is what really matters. So that's what a lot of it is focused on. It's more, I would say, educational than sales pitchy. I don't have a secret or a system or any of that stuff. Yeah. It's more just, hey, this is what everybody else is saying. Let me kind of be your conduit to where if you feel like that's overwhelming to go research all these people, let me kind of give you a little synopsis of this is what people think make good leaders. Now, how can you take all this information and all this wisdom and apply it to you and your specific business and your specific job with your specific personality?
And it makes me think of growing up, they would always say, well, I'm much older than you, not 26, dress for the job that you want. Mm-hmm. So I think that could apply as well in leadership, just dressing for it, preparing for it, getting yourself in the mindset. It can be scary to lead people. Mm-hmm. And
I think it's probably one of the toughest jobs. I mean, obviously there are things that are way tougher as far as physically endangerment, things like that, but psychologically, emotionally, it is terrifying.
It is exhausting. And it's very lonely.
Yes.
Maybe touch on that a little bit, because leadership, business ownership, those can be very lonely roles. Like I said earlier, you mentioned you're doing all this back end work before you even have made it public. That can be lonely. Nobody knows what you're doing. Maybe your spouse, but that's it. And in leadership, you've transitioned into that role and coaching. Touch on that a little bit about how it can be.
Yeah, I've been fortunate in my life in these roles where I've had some really great mentors and great people to help me along. I was in an interesting situation with coaching and teaching to where the last time that there was a head coach at that school, he was still on staff. He was a teacher there, and me and him have a great relationship. He helped me a lot. Obviously, like I said, working with family, this entrepreneurial stuff's kind of in my blood. My granddad owned several Ford dealerships in Atlanta. My dad's been a franchise owner of a staffing recruiting firm for the last 17 years. So there are always great people that I can call on. But to your point, one thing that I learned very early on, and this is even high school, college, just doing different leadership roles, is I try never to judge the person who is above me, because I know they're making more decisions. They're making decisions with more information than what I have. And I actually had a chance to get to sit down and talk to the president of the university I attended. And I asked him what the hardest thing in his role was. And he said, the hardest thing in my job is that I have to make decisions. And a lot of people, a lot of times they agree, but sometimes they disagree. And I have to just be okay with the fact that they're disagreeing, even though they don't have that information that I do. And I still want to tell them, like, hey, this is why I made this decision. Here's all these reasons why, but they can't know all that stuff. And so I just gotta have to sit with that. And I think that is something that is very hard. And I've experienced, I'm sure you've experienced, where it's like, if I could just tell you everything that's going on, it would make more sense. Yeah. But I can't.
Yeah. And it is hard. And one of the things as a people pleaser, like who I am,
me too.
It's like, oh my goodness, they're not gonna like me, which not everybody's gonna like you. And that's just part of growth. Do you touch on that on your book at all?
I do. First off, I think one of my biggest flaws that I've been working on personally, because I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. I'm an optimist. Let's here to have a good time. I don't dislike a lot of people. I just don't have that in me. And so I like to get along with people. And when people don't like to get along with me, I've always defaulted to, well, how can I be better? How can I do it better? Which is a really good mentality to have in some instances, but it's also very detrimental in others. Something I think philosophically that really leads into that is this idea of imposter syndrome. And that is something I wanted to talk about when I was doing this, because I've always felt that. Like I said, being kind of the youngest leader in the room, I've always felt imposter syndrome. And what I kind of assumed was, okay, I'm going to study this and I'm going to see how all these older people who have these big fancy jobs, how they got over their imposter syndrome. So I started reading this report by Korn Ferry. They did one of the largest surveys of leaders in the 2020s. I think it was in 2024. They interviewed Fortune 500 CEOs, and they found that the percentage of Fortune 500 CEOs that experience imposter syndrome is not statistically significantly different than the percentage of entry-level leaders that experience it. It doesn't go away. If it doesn't go away with time, and it doesn't always go away with experience, and this was new CEOs, so these are not necessarily your CEOs that have been there for 30 years, but if you have somebody who's 65 and they just got into a CEO job, they're having as much as imposter syndrome as somebody who's 25 and just got their first team lead position. So if it doesn't go away with age or with rank, then how can we have it go away with different abilities and strategies, one of which I think is learning and development. I think also being easier on yourself. Mentorship is a big one, but it is hard being that people pleaser, because I think in a lot of circumstances, going back to the loneliness, we feel that if we can make everybody like us, especially maybe people under us, it won't feel as lonely. What I have unfortunately discovered the hard way in some of my roles, not the one I'm in now, thankfully, but beforehand, I think one of my biggest mistakes is there is a big difference between being liked and being respected.
Absolutely.
And you can't get a lot of stuff done just by being liked. You can get a lot of stuff done by being respected. And that is where I'd love to be both. And it goes back to, this is old. So I have a history degree. So this is Machiavelli in the 1500s in the Enlightenment movement. Liked or feared. You might rather be feared than liked. It goes back to that. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that imposter syndrome can take over? And there's also the fake it till you make it, keep pushing forward, and you become more confident in that. And even as you were building your side hustle here, you were taking steps, and every step that you take, whether it was a business plan or maybe it was a logo design or anything like that, you just gain a little bit more confidence, and it's that slow step of getting you to where you want to be. That's pretty fascinating. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one out there.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, but you get in those lonely states, and that can certainly happen. So you're launching this new business. You're excited about it. You want to help others. What's the passion behind it? Where did it come from?
Well, like I said, I used to be a teacher, and so education has always been something I've really liked. And I have always loved, as you can probably tell already, I'm not scared to talk. And
It's that history degree. You like putting the facts out there.
Yeah, and I've always loved the idea of I'm passionate about something that I think is valuable, in that case, history, and that I think can help people understand the world better, be better within themselves. Now I want to go and share that thing. And I've always been I try to make my living talking. That's probably one of the biggest things that I got going for me. I was sitting through and I was thinking about, honestly, May of 2024 is when I left education. I started my job at Spherion, and it's been such a blessing working for my dad. But from that point, I've always wanted to own something. And I think probably the biggest hurdle I had in education was I like having ownership and control. And that is not a system where you can have ownership and control. And even if I was the head coach of something, I didn't have the ownership and control. And so going into the private sector, going into business, I was like, the long term is I want to have ownership and control over something.
Yeah.
And so I did probably, not the worst thing, it works for some people, but the worst thing for me, which was I'm going to just start trying to find anything I can to just have that title of business owner or business development. I'm just going to find an industry, which there is, going back to the history part of me, the statistics part, there is statistically successful people doing that. That is a valid option. But for me, it just wasn't working. So it was kind of one of those classic stories of I stopped looking, and then I pretty much immediately just started writing, and I didn't plan to have anything. It almost was like a journal just to write down my thoughts and my opinions on things, and then it started to go more, and then I was like, well, maybe this is the thing. You know what? The one thing I do have going for me is I do have that education degree. I know how people learn. I know how people listen. I know different ways to teach people. Not that I have all the answers, but to provide the platform of education. And so I just started writing, and I've always been passionate on leadership philosophy. And I've always liked reading about leadership philosophy. I always felt like it was hard for me as a 25-year-old at that time with not a lot of money. Can't go pay $2,000 for some leadership conference. And I don't have the position to go be an executive coach. And I have great mentorship and leadership with my family, but we don't necessarily have some huge leadership program in our company to do it for. If I'm feeling this way, there's probably other people that are feeling that way. And so how can I create, and just as a side point, one thing I do not like is these guru people that are like, I have all these secrets and they got their flashy stuff and here's the secret and the answer. Because I truly don't believe there's one way to do things. I don't think there's one leadership philosophy that works for everybody. I think it's very much customizable to you. And so the standpoint of, I wish there was a company that had affordable products, that had somebody that wasn't saying, here's the answers to everything that you need because I know all of it, because I know that that's not true. But more so, hey, I am facilitating all of this wisdom, and here is what this successful person thinks about this situation. Here's what this successful person thinks. Here's what this one. Which one do you think works best for you?
Right.
Which philosophy works best in your situation?
And it gives them the ownership of taking on a little bit.
And so I figured, why not start it myself, I guess. So that's where we're here.
And then you talked about control. One of the things that I've discovered in business ownership and in life, motherhood, there's this desire for that control, but we never fully have full control. Mm-hmm. Our clients will direct us, our vendors, our family. So how do you feel you will go about embracing the control that you do have versus what you want?
It's a good question.
I know. I don't even think I can answer it myself.
Yeah, I will say the one way that I've tried to approach that is I have a vision, have a mission. I'm not necessarily tied to how that gets carried out from the standpoint of what I want and what the official mission statement of Culture Compass is: empowering and equipping the next generation of leaders. And my true belief is that in order to do that, you need to be proactive in your leadership development, and you need to start trying to work on that before you have any type of title. That's really what my mission is. One of the reasons that I took so long before I said anything to anybody is I wanted to have a plan of, if I was the customer, these are the things that I would like. A book, maybe short form video clips, a newsletter, whatever. I need to be open. Going back to the education degree, there are so many ways in which people learn and which they prefer to learn. And so one of the things that I have done already in some instances is how I would want to ingest this content may not be how other people want to ingest the content. And I'm very open to, let's try a newsletter. Let's try one-on-one coaching. Let's try free one-page little guides and things like that. And that has been, I think, in my way, how I've tried to relinquish some of that control is I don't have to dictate, you need to learn my message or my passion, my vision in the same way that I want to.
Not a cookie cutter.
Yes. And so that has been a real eye-opener for me. And that is something that I did try to plan for. Is I remember telling my wife, and like I said, I did this in January, probably November. I was like, I know what I want to do. I have the stuff done, I have the materials, and I know what this is going to be. I have about 15 different ways that we could get there. And what I want to be open-minded to whatever way that the market dictates.
Yeah. You have to be able to evolve. Everything shifts. I knew about my second company that I wanted to launch a year ago. I made the logo, came up with the name, and slowly just built it. And it's evolved into something completely different. And it's a beautiful thing, but you have to be open to change. And not just in the business world, but in your personal life too. Because things happen,
Absolutely.
life happens, and you just go forward from there. What is one decision you have made that reflects restraint rather than expansion?
I think not rushing. Like I said, I do think I get this from my family. I have a lot of ideas, and I generally like to go before I think. And this is all the way back. I was definitely one of those kids when I was 11, 12 years old that was like launching YouTube channels and trying to do that stuff, all of that.
Was it on a skateboard? Or?
No. It was the video game YouTubers.
Okay.
But I actually launched a podcast a couple years ago, did a couple episodes. And with all of those, it was basically I had an idea. I got really hooked on the idea. I did the bare minimum to launch it, and I just threw it out there. And then I either held myself to a timeline that I couldn't do, or I realized that this wasn't really something with staying power that I really wanted to do, so I just stopped. And one of the things that I realized with whatever I wanted to do next, which evolved into Culture Compass, is I want to do it the right way. I want to make sure and continually asking myself, is this something I want to do? Because one thing I have learned, especially these last couple months that it's been around, is I did a lot of the legwork beforehand, but there is still a lot of little things I have to do right now. Wanting to find opportunities to grow, already having a 40-hour-a-week job, and I am not someone, for good or for bad, I think probably for good overall, but maybe bad for this, I'm not someone that wants to work 100 hours a week. I have hobbies, I have a family, I want to spend time doing other things. I don't want this to be my entire life. And so with that, I really wanted to make sure that I did it the right way, that I was slow about it, that I was deliberate about it, that I didn't tell people. There were times I would go to my wife and just say on the record right now, have the best wife. Yes. I would go like, well, I could just launch it and I could say that I'm working on an ebook and then I could make some posts and maybe people, and she was like, no, do not do that. Wait until you finished everything and then post it. And definitely the right move, because a lot of this stuff took way longer than I thought. I thought I could just get on a website builder and do that in 2 hours, and that did not happen.
Well, and that might have taken you back to your YouTube days where you were doing something so quickly and rushing. And I think that's a really important factor. Two things. One, surrounding yourself with people that can help guide you and steer you and give you their insight and being open to hearing it. And also setting it up, planning it out. You know, the whole series for this podcast is built with intention, and you did that, or you are doing that. And it's so exciting to see it evolve and what it's going to be. And you have a passion for it. And what's so good too, is you're talking about your boundaries that you're setting. You don't want it to take 1,000 hours a week. We don't have that many for one, but you have a life and you want to have that good work-life balance. And I think in the different generations, the different work ethics between a 20-something-year-old and a 50-something-year-old or a 30-something-year-old, they all have different priorities in life. And I think that's such a healthy dynamic because we're all different and it's going to evolve differently for everybody.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited for you. I think it's going to be amazing. I think that you have a niche market, which in marketing, you know, I love that. And if you want help promoting that, you know who to call.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions or anything else you want to share that you thought about? We're going to edit all of this.
Yeah.
Because you covered everything. It's like you were prepared perfectly.
Well, like I said, I got the talking going for me. I don't know if I got much else, but
No, in your history background, I think it's helping guide you to where you want to be. I believe that God gifted us with our paths, and we all have a choice in how we go into life. And some of the stuff in the back of my life is pretty rocky, but I chose how to go on a different path, and here I am today. Am I a millionaire? Not yet. Yet.
Yeah.
I believe it to my core. So.
Yeah, I think because I feel like we've been talking a lot about specifically me, but maybe things that can help somebody else. I do think being open to different things is so big. And when you look at business, especially if you're talking about maybe somebody who is wanting to be an entrepreneur or is thinking about doing that, looking at the different things. And I know we've talked about this before, but as I mentioned, I am a solopreneur, a solo entity, much like you started out, and no real backing, no any of that stuff, but a lot of support. And that's different than how my dad and granddad did it, because they were both franchised entrepreneurs. That is a whole nother rabbit hole with a whole nother list of pros and cons, but it's a very viable option. And so I think it's so important for people as they are thinking through, do I want to launch something? What does that look like? Because as I mentioned, for me, doing something small like this, going all in mentally, but not going all in with financially or my personal life, or I'm going to do this or I'm going to be homeless or one or the other. That's not how I roll. But going back to that book I mentioned with Harvard, they said both options are viable. You look at the amount of people who did a franchise model, can be very successful. You look at the amount of people who started a business out of passion, it can be very successful. You also look at the amount of people who started business out of, I don't know much about this, but I can tell there's a need. I remember reading about, I forget what the company's called, but mobile dentistry. The guy hadn't worked in dentistry a day in his life. He just saw a need of, hey, there's so many people in the corporate world that are having to leave for 3 hours to get their appointments. What if we could bring a mobile doctor site or a mobile dentistry site in the parking lot of a big corporate building and just have everybody do it? And he hired a bunch of people that knew how to do it. And so there's a lot of different ways to do things. And I think that is a core belief of mine personally. As I mentioned with Culture Compass, that is a core belief of leadership. There's a lot of different ways to be a leader. There's not one, despite what you may see from gurus online, there's not one way to do things. But there's also not one way to be a business owner, to get into it, to think about it. There are a lot of different paths. They all have pros and they all have cons. There's not a right answer. It's what is right for you.
Absolutely. I think one of the things, even in marketing, as we offer those services to people, I want you to be true to who you are, not just your brand, but who you are as a person, because it's going to make you successful if you can commit to your own beliefs and your own desires and passions and all of that. It's so imperative to just be true and deciding if the entrepreneur mindset is a franchise. I even thought about franchising my business. I did my research, I talked to different franchise owners, decided it wasn't a path that I wanted to take. But as an entrepreneur, one that has many ideas all the time, I segment when I can give those ideas attention, give it some room to question it out, and then go back, yes or no. Is it going to fit in with the long-term goal of my brands? Multiple brands.
Yes.
Because I'm just that way.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I appreciate you being here. I think this was a lot of fun.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If today's conversation resonated, I invite you to follow Mac Moments on your podcast platform so you do not miss future episodes. Growth does not happen all at once. It happens moment by moment. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to our next conversation.